Welcome to Guest Talks with Tracy Arbon, bringing you special guest interviews from musictalks.xyz.
Hello everybody, welcome to Guest Talks with Tracy Arbon, and today we're talking to an absolute legend in music. He was discovered by Quincy Jones, has about 58 albums so far, and a Grammy Award winner. Welcome, Bob James.
Thank you very much, Tracy. It's great to be talking with you all the way on the other side of the globe.
Yes. It's nice and early here for me, so it's good. It's really nice to get up before the sun gets up here. I should do that more often.
I like it too. That's my best work time, when things are quiet, and I think my mind is a little fresher at that hour.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's great. So let's talk about 58 albums. How did this all start for you? How were you discovered by Quincy Jones?
Well, I was at the end of my college days, and I had a trio at that time that was playing in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was in school at the University of Michigan. And we decided to go down to this collegiate jazz festival and compete at playing some kind of avant-garde music at the time. And we were really doing it for fun, not really expecting to have any great results from it. And lo and behold, there were actually two very distinguished judges. One of them was Quincy Jones, and the other one was Henry Mancini. Mm-hmm. So I got to play in front of both of them, and as it turned out, my group prevailed and we won the festival, both individually and as a group. So it kind of launched me in a very wonderful way, because Quincy was an A&R guy for Mercury Records at that time. Yeah. And one of the benefits from being at that festival was getting signed to Mercury label and make my first record in 1962.
Wow. And so, you've worked on with some amazing people like Hank Crawford and overseeing, great significant hits for Paul Simon, Neil Diamond, Kenny Loggins. How was that? When you first started, interacting and playing with these people, how did you feel when things began for you and it started to take off?
It was a very gradual process, Tracy, and I can still remember a lot of being nervous about whether I could keep up, because I was ambitious in moving to New York right away out of college, and I wanted to try my hand, but I realized that the competition in the big city was pretty heavy, and it was a number of years before I ever got really that much significant work, but I stayed with it, and little by little, I met various people, and of course, Quincy at the beginning was really helpful in introducing me to a lot of people, and I eventually got the job as music director for Sarah Vaughan, the great jazz singer, and I toured with her back in the 1960s, and just having that as a badge helped me be accepted. And in the early 1970s, another helpful time for Quincy Jones, he called me to play on an album of his called Walking in Space. And that turned out to be my audition for Creed Taylor, who was the owner of and president of this label CTI that became so important to me in the 1970s. He was making a lot of jazz records, and which became really successful. And as a result of Quincy asking me to write a couple of the arrangements on his album Walking in Space and playing on it. Right. That led to a bunch of other gigs at the CTI label, and the opportunity to meet people like Freddie Hubbard and Hank Crawford and Stanley Turrentine and Grover Washington Jr. and so many different people that I met and interacted with and learned, and each time I was getting closer and closer to being on the scene. It was a very stimulating time.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you should say, it at the beginning. I guess it's a step-by-step process, and Music Talks is all about, trying to help those independent artists sort of just get out there a little bit more. And we've got different levels of, I guess, marketing and promoting independent music, depending on where they are in the stages of their careers. But what advice would you give to artists that are either just starting out or who have been with it for, let's say, 10 years? A lot of them feel like they... Mm-hmm. I mean, have you ever been in a stage where you feel like, oh, I can't do this anymore, or did you just keep pushing?
Well, in my case, I kept pushing. I'm glad I did. It's been a really great life, and Lot a chance to do an awful lot of stuff. And looking back on my life and career, I never considered anything else. A lot of people when I was in college were talking about a plan B, do something else that was more conventional or more predictable in the way of making a living. And certainly the music business is not predictable in that way. But even though I've had a good life with no complaints, I've also seen a lot of extremely talented people that for one reason or another, either luck wasn't going their way or timing wasn't right, and they've struggled to make it professionally. And very often I have kind of developed what is, it may seem a little bit brutal, but I generally tend to recommend don't do it. Don't get in this business, period. Yeah. Stay out of it. And kind of the reason why I say it, it's not a flippant thing to say, but I believe that if people are a little bit too timid or conservative or unsure or insecure about what they do, they really don't have much of a chance in this very highly competitive field. And if they really are talented, really stubborn, really completely determined and strong about their conviction, they're not going to listen to my advice anyway. They're going to say, Bob James, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I'm staying in here and do it. And if they're that tough and that good and that resilient, maybe they have a good chance. Otherwise, it's not it's in no way is it an easy scenario.
No. I have to agree with you there. It's a lot of hard work, and even though there is this whole thing about saying, find your passion, and you're halfway there. The thing is, somebody can be really, really, like you said, ultra talented, and they could be extremely passionate about what they do, but it requires more than passion. Would you agree with that? I mean,
absolutely, sure. And there's a mystery, a magic about why some things ring the right bell with an audience and capture some of this thing that we're all trying for, but it's not factual. And unlike a sport where if you just keep practicing, you get better and better or faster and faster, and there's a kind of a specific thing that you're aiming for. In our field, we are hoping for magic.
Right.
At least that's the way I feel.
Yeah.
And you don't always get it. And even when you think you get it, and maybe your friends think you've got it, and they love you and whatever, but you get out there in the real world and the timing is wrong and whatever else. So I guess the other thing that I like to encourage people to enjoy the process. Yeah. There is no guarantee of success, no guarantee of being at the top of the charts or getting famous or any of those things that people think of as a goal. If you like the process of making music, regardless of whether only 10 people end up liking it or 1 million people like it, the process of doing it is a wonderful thing in itself. And
that's right, yeah.
And it's separate from the business. I don't like to see young people start talking about, I want to be famous or I want to be a star. Well, that's kind of the wrong way to go about thing. First, figure out what you're going to do. At first, try to be really, really good, as good as you can be, and be honest with yourself. Try to listen to the reactions that you get. Do people fall in love with your music when you play it or sing it?
Yeah, that's true. And it all comes back to enjoying what you said, enjoy what you do, because, at the end result, you're going to look back, and if you're not enjoying it, you're going to look back in your life and say, why did I do that for?
Sure. Exactly.
I've read a little bit about you going over to the Shanghai Conservatory of Music. This was quite interesting when I read a little bit about this with their the recording is that the Angels of Shanghai?
Yes, very wonderful memory.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that? You was it using some of their traditional instruments?
Yes, and I have had a pretty eclectic music life, and I've always liked the challenge of exploring different styles and working in different idioms, and of course music and jazz. But ironically, on one of my trips to Japan, not to China, but I was dealing with a Japanese promoter who was very fascinated with traditional Chinese music. And there were a couple of the traditional instruments that he explained to me had been very popular in the area of healing music,
right.
Music therapy. And so this project with me started off trying to cooperate with him to come up with some music that would have been considered to be healing music. But by the time I started to explore and really got into it, I got much, much deeper into my concept was to combine jazz and traditional Chinese music and see what would come out of it, see what kind of hybrid thing would come out of it. And what ended up coming out was so much different from what I had originally expected, and largely as a result of the extremely talented young Chinese musicians that I met there at the Shanghai Conservatory. And this promoter had kind of handpicked what he considered the best students or the most open-minded students to work with me. And we just went on this adventure, and I tried to get inside their musical heads to see what stimulated them, and almost none of them really had any direct experience with jazz. So it was a adventure for all of us, and the music that came out of it was, to me, different from anything else I've done, and I'm very proud of that project.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And also, I've noticed you've been titled, is it the King of Hip Hop? Due to Nautilus, which was one of your other songs. Hip hop, I mean, what it's quite interesting to go from jazz to hip hop, but it actually has worked very well with your sampling.
It's been crazy total shock when I first learned that my music was being used in that world. Before they were even calling it hip hop, when it was really basically called the rap field. Gradually, I've learned that the rap producers, and a lot of them came out of the turntable DJ clubs circuit, in which they began to scratch and take little chunks of music, and they weren't actually playing instruments in the conventional way. They were just grabbing little chunks of things and patchwork, putting them together, but they needed a musical source. And it just totally coincidentally, my records were in the right place at the right time, or whatever sound that they were looking for, the groove that they were looking for, was embodied in some of my records from the 1970s. And several of my songs got sampled at that time, and I guess developed a sort of a reputation amongst the rap and hip hop producers to check out these cuts if you wanted to get that certain kind of groove that they liked rapping to or whatever. And it just kind of exploded. And I never had anything directly to do with it. It just happened that my records caught the right ears and reminded me that probably the most important thing in our business is to protect your copyrights. And I did, and I had the good fortune that I actually owned my master recordings and the compositions, so that when when they wanted to license them, they had to come to me.
Yeah.
So this kind of cottage industry came about, and the song Nautilus that you were asking about has been sampled hundreds of times. Crazy. I would never in a million years would have predicted the way that has happened, but it did, and it's still happening. And I'm still so curious about it that when it came time to do my new CD for myself, I thought I would turn the thing around and do it in reverse and sample myself. So on one of my tunes, I took Nautilus and reinvented it and kind of did my version of what I think the hip-hop producers would do if they take someone else's piece of music and manipulate it.
Yeah, I've noticed that actually. I took a listen to Submarine on your new album that is to be released on this coming Friday. I love Submarine. I think it's great.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun for me, and since I was sampling myself, I think I had a kind of inside track about getting to the bottom of what I felt the essence of that original recording was, and I actually tried to duplicate the keyboard Fender Rhodes sound and play in 2018 to play it with a similar approach, and I went back and forth with what I had played 40 years ago, which was a kind of a I don't know, music therapy experience for me as well.
Right. Well, on that note, let's take a listen to Submarine, and then we'll come back and have a chat about the new album.
Great.
absolutely love that track. Now, your new album, you've been in, as they say, hiatus for quite a few years. What did you do in the time that you've had off?
Well, I was very busy. I've been a member of the jazz group Foreplay since its inception in 1991. So we're beyond our 25th anniversary of being together as a group, but not full time. When we formed the group, all four of us had separate solo careers, and I wanted to keep my solo career going. But the more success we had with the Foreplay group, it was taking up a lot of time, and I was doing a lot of touring with that group. And so I sort of moved away from a full-time solo career, and that became part of it. And in the meantime, I've had very nice opportunities to collaborate with other artists. During this last 10 or 12 year period, I also had a reunion with David Sanborn. He and I made a record back in 1986 called Double Vision, that won the Grammy Award and was very successful for both of us. But for one reason or another, we had never gotten together again to collaborate after that time in 1986. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we decided that we'd waited long enough. And so we made a new record called Quartet Humane.
Right.
And we toured with that record for almost a year. So I was very busy with that. And I also made a separate record with the bass player from the Foreplay group called The New Cool, Nathan East and I. So I've been busy. And anytime with a project like that, it also involves touring and preparation and all of that stuff. So I haven't been sitting around.
And so now you've got this brand new album coming out very, very soon. It's called Espresso. Now, it's a trio.
Yes, I'm feeling very sentimental about it. When I started realizing that the timing was going to be right to do a new solo project for myself, I got this feeling that it would be really good to kind of go back to my roots and to go back to that time that we were just talking about when I was just out of college and I wanted to be a jazz piano player. And the classic instrumentation that's always been my favorite has been just the piano, bass, and drums concept. And I've done several projects, but also moved away from it into other sounds and more orchestral stuff. And last year I had a gig at the New York City Blue Note, and I decided to do that gig as a trio. And the guys that I used, Billy Kilson on drums and this young bass player, Michael Palazzolo, really stimulated me, and I could feel how much the audience was in our corner and wanting to join us on the kind of adventure. It just felt good. Both of these guys were supportive, but they also had virtuosity, and it just really felt like the right vibe for what I wanted to do. So at that time was when I pretty much made the commitment that I wanted my new album to have both of those guys involved, and I wanted to have it revolve around the jazz piano trio concept. As it turns out, there's several cuts where I kind of strayed away from that and did use some more orchestral sounds, but at the fundamental part of it is the jazz trio.
Yeah, and it is truly an exceptional album. Each track is very different from each other. You've got also the Ain't Misbehavin' on there too, which I can see. And you've got a track called Bulgogi. Now, I've noticed you've named the album Espresso, and you've got a track called Bulgogi. Now, most people know what an espresso is, but Bulgogi is a food. And yes. I was checking on the album to see if there's any more food titles.
Well, Tracy, I wish that there was some logical explanation that I could give you for my titles. Some of them are kind of crazy. And being an instrumentalist, when you write an original composition, sometimes the titles can be pretty random because there's no lyrics. I have traveled recently to Korea and made a lot of friends over there. And there was one particular dish that I really liked, called bulgogi, and I just like the sound of the word. It just sounded like a song title to me. I don't know why, but it sounded like something that had energy. And no, it doesn't. I don't necessarily drink a cup of espresso with a bulgogi thing, but there is a tie-in. There's actually one more tie-in. There's a song called Il Boccolone that was named after a restaurant that I really liked in Tokyo. So it's just a lot of it has to do with timing. That I have this composition that I've just finished, and I don't want to call it song number 53 or something like that.
Yeah. Are you going to be touring with this album? What's the plan with this?
Definitely. I'm going to be hitting it pretty hard starting in September and through the rest of this year and hopefully well into next year too. So far, I've got booked a Japan tour at the Tokyo Blue Note, and then we're kind of making the Blue Note circuit. There's a Blue Note in Hawaii, and I'm also going to be doing the Blue Note in New York. So those gigs and many concerts in between. I've got quite a few dates booked in the U.S., and I wish there was a Blue Note in Australia. We got to get one down there in Sydney.
Wow, that sounds like a great idea. Would love to have you down here. I would be there in a flash. I just can't tell you how much I love your music. Everybody, I would love everybody to keep an eye out for where you're going to be. We'll try and maybe pop some dates up on the site as well, so people can. Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, that'll be great. So please do yourself a favour, everybody, and go and check out Bob James' music, and you'll be blown away. We're actually going. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, look, I love jazz. I've got to say, it's one of my favorite genres of music, and I actually studied jazz as well. So I actually studied at the Conservatorium of Music in Classical and Opera, believe it or not, and then I did jazz as well. So and ended up doing pop. So,
well,
but
I share that love for eclecticism and going back and forth between genres that are very different. It really is fun for me to get into that mindset.
Yeah, look, I just love it. I just think if you love, a certain kind of just music at that time, getting into it, depending on what your mood is as well, I think it says a lot about you at that time, and why not? Why stick to just, I guess, a certain genre, as they say, and put yourself in a box, I suppose. I think it's a lot of fun. But we'll be placing this up on the website as well, as it'll be available. It's available on iTunes, on Spreaker, on iHeartRadio, and we're going to end off playing one of the tracks from Espresso called Bulgogi, but don't drink the espresso while you're listening to the song. Actually, yes, you can have an espresso. Why not?
Absolutely.
So we're going to take a listen to Bulgogi now. And Bob, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I would like to thank you very much, Tracy, for playing the music, and just keep putting in the good word, and maybe figure out how I can get myself down there to perform in Australia. I would love to. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time, and all the very best with this brand new album.
Thank you so much, and I'm really glad the Skype audio worked out for us too.
Yeah, so am I. So, look, you can actually see everything on the Music Talks website on our Guest Talks page. You can hear our podcast on Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. But for now, to end the show, we're going to be playing Bulgogi from Bob James' very, very latest album, Espresso. See you next time.
Feel the power. Guest Talks with Tracy Arbon. Interviews from musictalks.xyz.